Welcome back to Leeds Lately. This is, of course, by the title and thumbnail, you'll already know, a video about GEORGINIO Rutter's move to Brighton and Hove Albion. Before we get into it, though, make sure you hit that big red button to somewhat ease my pain. But yes, GEORGINIO Rutter's release clause has been triggered, around £40 million by Brighton and Hove Albion back up in the Premier League. And Daniel Farke says that he's been clearing out his locker, that he's been, that's GEORGINIO, not Farke, and that GEORGINIO has been saying some emotional goodbyes to his friends. So it does seem like he's going to be out, despite the fact that some people are saying that Leeds are going to try to offer him a new contract and try to get him to stay. Look, it'd be amazing if that happens, but I think it'd be a miracle if it does. GEORGINIO Rutter leaving has caused even more kind of discontentment in the Leeds United fan base, and a lot of Leeds United fans are calling for the 49'ers head, calling for Farke's heads, other way around, but you know what I mean, and basically taking massive issue with this. So let's go back to the start then. GEORGINIO Rutter was signed January 2023 by the 49'ers, Andrea Razzazzani, Victor Orta, etc., etc. Now, in the original tweet where GEORGINIO Rutter was signed, it said the 49'ers played a huge role in getting this deal across the line. We do not know for a fact who put the release clause in there of £40 million when signing a £35 million player. It's not a clever thing to do, buying a player for £35 million that you think is going to be worth double that, triple that in a good few years' time based on his high potential, his high ceiling. Buying him for that, expecting to make profit at least, if not having him for a few good years of playing, and then put in a release clause £5 million above what you paid for him. Seems ridiculous to me. Anyway, that release clause expired or was due to expire at midnight the night that Brighton put that offer in. So they've waited for this, and they've gone and triggered it at the last possible moment. And GEORGINIO Rutter, legally, if he wants to go, has to go now because the release clause has been triggered. Now, the other argument to this is that Leeds should have offered him a new deal before this was triggered, so that wipes out his old deal, and he basically goes on to a new contract. If we'd have offered him more money on a new contract with no release clause, then there would have been no possible way for them to get him out the club if the club didn't want to sell him. Especially considering the P&S position that we're in now that we've sold Archie Gray, Crescencio Somerville, Glenn Kamara. Because of the position that we're in with those sales, we don't actually have to sell. But because there was a release clause, we do have to sell because it's legally binding that in his contract, if a club is to pay £40 million or more, automatically that is triggered and he has to go unless the player doesn't himself want to go to the other club. So that's when Leeds come in and say, let's offer you a new contract. But had they done that before that time, they would have been able to wipe out that release clause and just say, well, he's 50 million, 60 million pounds, and then Brighton probably would have gone, okay, we'll back off, we won't buy him. So that's really, really disappointing. And it's also really, really disappointing because we're 2 games into the season. We've signed Jayden Bogle for £5 million, who, okay, on paper, decent right-back signing, comes in and makes us a better squad all round if we keep everybody else. We've signed Alex Cairns, a third-choice goalkeeper, for free from Salford City, obviously just to be in the background, to be a coach, to be kind of development for the young goalkeepers and things like that, set an example in training, and just to kind of fill the numbers. And then we've signed Joe Rothwell, who I thought, even though we were terrible against Middlesbrough, was one of the better players in that midfield. But again, just a loan signing from Bournemouth. It's not world shaking, is it? It's not anything that we haven't seen before. And we haven't made any decent first team signings with the money that we've got from these deals. Now, at this point, you look at the squad and you go, okay, even without GEORGINIO, the first 11 is pretty decent. When you look at us on paper, the first 11 is pretty decent. But once you get past that now, because the players like Brendan Aronson and like Dan James, perhaps, who maybe would have been on the bench before, Joel Piroux, they would have been on the bench before. They're now having to come into the first team. So then therefore you look at the bench and go, oh, we've got no options on the bench. So we need signings and we need them quick. I will go into much more depth on this, but at this point, it's like you've got so much money now. Before we go into this, you've got so much money because Leeds have now made the most profit out of any football club in the world, and we're a championship side this summer. We've sold all of our best players. Also, as was pointed out on Twitter by one of the journalists, can't remember which one, so sorry about that, but he said 56% of the goals and assists that came in Daniel Farke's Leeds last season have now been sold and no longer play for the club. So someone has got to replace those goals. Now, this brings me on to, we've got so much money to spend. Buy the best players in the Championship. Buy Jonathan Rowe. 12 goals, 5 assists, I think, last season. If you want to know more information on him, I did make a video. Jonathan Rowe, bring him in. You bring Morgan Whittaker in. I think he scored 19 goals last season and got a load of assists as well. Bring Morgan Whittaker in, bring Jonathan Rowe in. That's a start. That's probably about 25 to 30 million pounds. We've made 160 million pounds profit. Bring in those two, first of all. I think we need backup defensively. I think Verber is a lot worse player than I remember him. Certainly, at least it was a terrible performance against Middlesbrough. I think we need another centre-back. Daniel Farke the other week saying we didn't need one. I think we need another centre-back, definitely. And I think we need some more midfielders as well. I just think with the players that we've lost... So you take Archie Gray, okay, he played a lot last season at right back and central midfield. So you take him and Ayling out and you've brought in Bogle and you've got Byram who can play right back. Arguably, we probably need another right back as well. You've lost Glenn Kamara, so you've brought in Joe Rothwell. That's 1 for 1. You've lost Crescencio Somerville. We've brought in no one. We've lost Jaden Anthony. Aronson comes back from loan. So there's still gaps all over this squad. You've now losing Jorginho and not brought anyone in. Obviously, it's only just happened, so he couldn't have brought anyone in yet. But Leeds need to fill these gaps, and they need to fill them fast because the season's already started. I'm not massively concerned about the start to the season that we've had. I believe that will be fixed very, very fast, and we won't keep conceding goals at the rate that we are, because that just doesn't really happen very often, especially to teams who are at the top of the Championship. So I'm not too concerned about those sorts of things. But what I want to see is Leeds now go, okay, let's go and buy these players, because they've essentially got a big pot of money that they can spend to get us back to the Premier League, and they need to start doing it. Because even if you look at Sheffield United, and the other day I was talking about how for Raksaki or Saki, they brought him in on loan with a break clause in January because they were willing to kind of take that risk, and the 49ers weren't willing to take that risk. I still stand by that would have been a bad idea, but they've still done good business. They brought in Callum O'Hare, who's someone that a lot of Leeds fans were interested in bringing in as that sort of number 10 midfielder, and they've brought in a decent few amount of players. They've tried to have a little bit of a rebuild. Leeds have sold all of their best players, most of their best players, and not brought anyone in. So it's now time to start recruiting. Go and get Jonathan Rowe for £15 million. Go and get Morgan Whittaker for £12 million, whatever it takes. Get them in, and then start building around them. Try and get in another central midfielder. Try and get in a right back, as a backup right back, and potentially another centre back. We need to fill these gaps, and we need to fill them quickly, and not just with the first player that we can think of, with decent, proven players who cost a bit of money. Please go out and buy them, Leeds. Please do it, because Georginio Rutter was one of the best things about seeing Leeds in the Championship, because whilst it's like, oh, we're back in the Championship again, we got to see people like him play. He was ghosting past players, creating chances, being just looking like he actually enjoyed football. And now he's gone. It's kind of like a little bit of that enjoyment factor has just left. And I would like to see Leeds go out and buy some proper players now, because we've got the money to do it. So 49ers, please just go and buy the players. There's no excuses anymore. Thanks for watching Leeds Lately, and hopefully the next one is a little bit happier.